In this day and age, we have the ability to run C++ applications on virtually any device that you can come across. All you need to do is look around for, well, there will be somewhere a resource detailing how you might be able to run C++ on whatever device you're on. In fact, there are web browsers that will compile the code. And what that really means is that you have access to this programming language. And this programming language is just the crunching of numbers to give you an output. If you don't have graphics involved, really that's all you can do. You crunch numbers, you get outputs, you might create creative software or business-like software that does more advanced algorithms and saves information and can be very useful. The incredible thing about modern hardware is that these CPUs can run calculations millions of times a second, right? The CPU clock speed or whatever. And it's just, so you create these little algorithms, and no matter how big they get in terms of code, there's a good chance that whatever you're doing will never outpace what your hardware could achieve, could crunch the numbers, could give you a feedback in a moment. So why bring all this up? What could you do with that? Well, it's really an art form. It's sort of an art form, programming. And what I mean by that is the text adventure. The computer text games, a whole genre that has been touched upon, but has not really been taken to the full extent of what could be created in terms of simulator software. Imagine sandboxed games where many elements are in there and they're all reacting to each other like a simulator, and you can create, well, a simulator based off any story mechanic, any story narrative that you can dream up. So computer text games, it's like living software, living books. Well, centered around whatever you'd want to bring about. So, imagine you have all this powerful hardware all around you, all the time. For the more creatively inclined person, this is like an untapped resource. You don't know how to code, it seems intimidating. It's like, how do you put together software? And without graphics, why even bother? Or even if you did bother, it does seem intimidating. How do you learn to code in the first place? Well, what if you just saw examples? What if this channel created software that was for a creative purpose? Video games, the computer text genre, the text adventure genre. How would you go about it? So let's see an example. What you really need to do with text adventures is create a turn-based system. You collect the input of the player, and then you calculate what's going on in the world, back and forth. So, if you don't know the lingo, it's like, oh, well, alright, how would that work? I need to get the input. You need a string variable to get the input, and then you're like, what's a string variable? And it's like a collection of characters, and those characters are equivalent to some number. I don't know. There's a lot of confusing elements, but if you just follow along, or if you saw examples and then saw them run in real time, well then you don't really need to know all the ins and outs. And that's what you need to learn about software. When you acquire software skills, you're always doing it with the end purpose in mind. You don't need to dive as deep as learning how to do assembly code to get the maximum usage of whatever you're attempting to do. You just need to learn to a skill level. So if you were trying to build a game, instead of learning OpenGL, you might pick up Unreal Engine or Unity or any of the pre-made software engines out there, game engines out there, and then combine that with some coding knowledge that you pick up, or yeah. But in our case, we're just building text where you take the input and you create an output. So, how would you go about that? Include IOStream. See, this is an example. I don't know exactly all the functionality of this IOStream library kit, but I know that doing this and this well, I mean, they just allow you to run this program. And what does it all mean? Using namespace std, int main, return 0. It's like, this is where programming is very unintuitive. You have to know the language. You have to actually study it if you're going to make any use of the language. So what I'm going to do is I already know C++ in a shallow way. I don't know all the ins and outs. I won't use the most effective possible methods to achieve what I'm doing, but I know how to loop information. I know how to save information. I know how to convert data. I know how to create the effective software where you're not, effective software. But I don't know all the ins and outs of C++. But for what we're doing, for what we're trying to attempt, it's more than enough. So, what would this do if I wanted to compile this and run? It gives me a blank. And that's not a shock. And then this is how the whole hello world would happen. See out, and then the two little lesser than signs, lesser than, and then you have hello world in parentheses, and then end L. Well, what that would output is hello world, and then the cursor goes down to the next line. All right, so there's how you get that result, and this would work this works anywhere. This whole include IOStream using namespace std, the int main, this 7 lines of code will compile nearly universally on any compiler, as far as I'm aware. And that's why you don't need to know all the ins and outs of what coding does. You need just to see the examples as I walk through how I would do things. So let's show how you would put yourself into let's show how you would collect information from the player. All right. So in this instance, I'm going to use a string variable. Call it string h. And then I'm going to let's see. I'm going to create a boolean. I'm going to create a true or false variable and call that g. I'm going to set that to true. And this will be the game. This means the game is true. It's on. Then, so that what I'm doing there is I'm declaring a variable, and then you can set it to be a value in the declaration just by putting an equal sign and then a statement about what value you want to hold. So now, let's do a loop. What we need to do is we need to prompt the player for an input, assess the input, and then loop and then give the player a chance to put another input in. How that would go is a do loop, a do while loop. A do while loop is a condition where it loops through the code until in the little while section, the condition is met. So we're going to do this set of code until G, our variable telling us if the game is on or off. We're going to do this loop of code while G is true, while it's on, while this game is running. So if we get to the while, if it runs through the loop and sees that G is false, the game terminates. The program goes on. It goes past the while. So now we're going to collect the player input. Get line cin h. Get line is a function. Cin, or the cin, is, well, the argument we're passing for collecting information, and then that information is going to be stored in h. So what this will do, or it'll be stored in our string variable h. So what this line of code does is it prompts the player, it takes an input from the keyboard, and then when the enter sign is clicked, the input is then put into the h variable. Then, if the h variable is, like, we can then check the h variable. Is h equal to something? So when you're doing an if statement, you have to use a double equal sign to do an evaluation of what you're assessing. So is h equal to, we'll just say end for now. Then we'll do brackets to show that this is the line of, this is all this code will execute while if h is equal to end, if we type end. And what will that do? That will turn G to false. And there you go. So if we type end, then G will be turned to false, and then the while loop will cancel, and the program will end. So I'm going to compile this, and I'm going to run. Then I'm going to click enter, and you'll see that now we can put stuff in, type on the keyboard, click enter, type on the keyboard, click enter, type end, click enter, type on the keyboard, can't do anything, the program is stopped. And then exit out. To make this a little more aesthetic, we're going to go ahead and say that right now